My brother and I, we share a love for adventure. The open road, the wind in our faces, it's freedom. We've been on countless road trips, each one a story. This story though, this one's different. This one chills me to the bone.
It was supposed to be a simple ride home, a chance to clear their heads, feel the asphalt beneath their tires. They didn't know it then, but they were heading straight into a nightmare.
We were cruising along enjoying the scenery. The wind was in our hair, and the hum of the engines was like music to our ears. The road stretched out before us, a ribbon of freedom winding through the landscape. We felt invincible, like nothing could go wrong. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was one of those sunsets that seemed to last forever, casting a magical glow over everything. We were lost in the moment, savoring the beauty around us. Then, a detour. A sign warned of construction ahead. No problem, we thought. We had faced detours before, and they had always led us to new adventures. We were confident, maybe a little too confident, that this would be no different. A little detour never hurt anyone. We took the turn, expecting a minor inconvenience at most. The road was less traveled, but it had its own charm. We joked and laughed, unaware of what lay ahead.
How wrong they were. The detour was not just a minor inconvenience, it was the beginning of a journey into the unknown. The detour took them off the main highway and onto a narrow, winding road. The trees closed in around them and the light began to fade. The road twisted and turned, each bend revealing more darkness. The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging them into darkness. The once vibrant colors of the sunset were replaced by the deep blues and blacks of night. The temperature dropped and the air grew colder. The air grew heavy, thick with an unsettling silence. Fog began to roll in, obscuring their vision. The headlights of their motorcycles cut through the mist, but it felt like they were riding through a dream or a nightmare. A sense of dread started to creep in. They were alone, truly alone. The road seemed to stretch on forever with no end in sight. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, every sound a potential threat. They pressed on, hoping to find their way back to the safety of the main road.
The further we rode, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as if the very air around us was thickening, making it harder to breathe. The trees on either side of the road seemed to close in, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers trying to grasp us. The once familiar hum of the motorcycle engines now felt like a distant echo, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Every mile we covered seemed to drag us deeper into an abyss, where the light of the world was a mere memory. The darkness seemed to press in on us, suffocating us. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was a tangible force, a living entity that sought to consume us. Our headlights, though bright, felt feeble against the overwhelming blackness. The road ahead was barely visible, and the shadows seemed to dance just beyond the reach of our lights, mocking our feeble attempts to pierce the gloom. The oppressive silence was occasionally broken by the distant hoot of an owl or the rustle of unseen creatures, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The headlights of our bikes cut through the gloom, but only illuminated a small circle of road ahead. Beyond that, it was as if the world ceased to exist. The narrow beam of light was our only guide, a fragile lifeline in a sea of darkness. Every turn of the road brought new shadows, new shapes that seemed to move and shift just out of sight. The forest around us was a maze of twisted branches and unseen dangers, and the path we followed felt increasingly uncertain. The darkness beyond the light seemed to writhe and twist. It was as if the shadows had a life of their own, moving in ways that defied logic. Shapes formed and dissolved in the periphery of our vision, and every now and then we could swear we saw eyes glinting in the dark, watching us. The road, once a straightforward path, now felt like a journey through a nightmare, where reality and illusion blurred together. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on our minds, making every moment a struggle to maintain our sanity.
Then, the whispers started. At first, they were barely audible, like the faintest breath of wind through the trees. But there was something unsettling about them, a quality that made the hairs on the back of our necks stand on end. It was as if the forest itself was speaking to us, sharing secrets that were never meant for human ears. The whispers seemed to come from all around, echoing through the trees and blending with the natural sounds of the night. Faint at first, like the rustling of leaves. but there was an underlying tone, a sinister edge that set them apart from the natural sounds of the forest. It was as if the very air was alive with voices, each one carrying a message of dread. The whispers grew more distinct, and we could almost make out words, though their meaning remained elusive. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees leaning in as if to listen to the secrets being shared, but gradually growing louder, more insistent. The whispers became a cacophony, a chorus of voices that seemed to rise and fall with the wind. They spoke of things long forgotten, of ancient fears and hidden dangers. The intensity of the sound was almost overwhelming, and it felt as if the forest itself was alive, pulsing with a dark energy. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, surrounding us in a web of sound that we couldn't escape. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was disorienting, and we found ourselves turning in circles, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. But it was futile. The whispers were all around us, an omnipresent force that defied explanation. The road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, a never-ending path through a world of shadows and whispers. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on our minds, and it felt as if we were being drawn deeper into a nightmare from which there was no escape. They couldn't make out any words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a tone of despair, of hopelessness and fear. The whispers carried a weight, a sense of impending doom that was impossible to ignore. It felt as if the very soul of the forest was crying out, warning us of dangers unseen. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to press down on us, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. Every step we took felt like a journey deeper into the unknown, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred. It was a chorus of despair, echoing through the empty night. The voices seemed to rise and fall in a haunting melody, a song of sorrow that resonated deep within our souls. The road ahead was shrouded in darkness, and the whispers seemed to guide us, pulling us deeper into the heart of the forest. The oppressive atmosphere was almost unbearable, and it felt as if we were being drawn into a world of shadows and whispers, where the light of day was a distant memory. The journey ahead was uncertain, and the only thing we could do was press on, hoping to find a way out of the darkness.
My brother and I exchanged nervous glances. We both felt it, the undeniable presence of something unnatural. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped our hearts. Our once carefree laughter was replaced by a strained silence.
They tried to rationalize their fear. It was just the wind, they told themselves, just their imaginations playing tricks on them. But deep down, they knew better. Something was out there with them, something sinister and unseen. They were being watched. They were being hunted. Suddenly, figures began to emerge from the darkness.
Tall, gaunt figures with long-reaching arms.
Their faces were obscured by shadows, but we could sense their hollow eyes fixed upon us.
They didn't move, didn't speak, they just stood there, their presence radiating an aura of malice.
The whispers intensified, swirling around us like a vortex of terror.
We were paralyzed with fear, our bodies refusing to obey our commands.
We were trapped in a nightmare, and these phantoms were our tormentors.
Finally, we snapped out of our trance.
We had to get out of there.
My brother gunned the engine of his bike, and I followed suit.
We roared down the deserted road, the figures receding into the darkness behind us. But the whispers followed us, growing louder with every passing second. They seemed to be gaining on us, their icy breath chilling us to the bone.
Our hearts pounded in our chests, our minds racing.
We had to outrun them. We had to escape.
We rode until we could ride no more. The night was pitch black, and the only light came from our motorcycle headlights, cutting through the darkness like knives. The road seemed endless, stretching out before us with no sign of civilization. We were driven by a mix of fear and determination, knowing that stopping was not an option. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every rustle in the bushes made our hearts race. We pushed our bikes to their limits, hoping to find some place, any place where we could feel safe.
Our bikes sputtered and died, out of gas. The sudden silence was deafening, and the realization hit us hard. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no fuel and no way to continue. The darkness seemed to close in around us, and the cold night air sent shivers down our spines. We looked at each other, trying to find some semblance of hope in our eyes, but all we saw was fear and uncertainty. The road we had traveled now seemed like a distant memory, and the reality of our situation began to sink in.
We were stranded, alone in the darkness with our unseen pursuers. The forest around us was thick and unwelcoming, the trees casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to move and shift with every gust of wind. We could hear the distant howls of animals, or perhaps something more sinister, echoing through the night. Our minds raced with thoughts of what could be out there, lurking just beyond our sight. We knew we had to find shelter, but the forest offered little in the way of comfort or safety. Every step we took felt like a gamble, a risk we had no choice but to take.
We stumbled into the woods, desperate for any kind of refuge. The underbrush was thick and tangled, making every step a struggle. Branches scratched at our faces and arms, and the uneven ground threatened to trip us with every step. We moved as quickly as we could, driven by the fear of what might be following us. Our breaths came in ragged gasps, and our hearts pounded in our chests. The forest seemed to go on forever, a never-ending maze of trees and shadows, but we couldn't stop. Not until we found somewhere to hide, somewhere to rest. We found an abandoned cabin. It stood alone in a small clearing, its dark silhouette barely visible against the night sky. The cabin looked old and forgotten, its wooden walls weathered and worn, but to us, it was a beacon of hope, a potential sanctuary from the dangers that lurked in the forest. We approached it cautiously, our eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of movement. The door creaked as we pushed it open, revealing the dark interior. It wasn't much, but it was better than being out in the open. It was dilapidated and decayed, but it offered some semblance of shelter. The inside was just as worn as the outside, with broken windows and a sagging roof. Dust covered every surface, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. But it was a roof over our heads, and that was all that mattered. We quickly set about making it as secure as we could, using whatever we could find to block the windows and reinforce the door. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best we could do with what we had.
We barricaded ourselves inside, praying that whatever was out there couldn't reach us. We moved furniture against the door, piled debris in front of the windows, and did everything we could to make the cabin a fortress. Our hands shook with fear and exhaustion. But we kept working, driven by the need to feel safe. Every noise outside made us jump, and every creak of the old cabin sent chills down our spines. We knew we couldn't stay here forever, but for now, it was our only option.
We huddled together, listening to the whispers that seemed to surround the cabin. The darkness outside was impenetrable, and the faint light inside did little to dispel the shadows. We spoke in hushed tones, afraid to make too much noise. Every creak and groan of the old cabin seemed amplified in the silence, and our imaginations ran wild with thoughts of what might be out there. We tried to stay calm, to reassure each other that we were safe, but the fear was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. We were safe for now, but for how long? The night seemed endless, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead weighed heavily on our minds. We took turns keeping watch, our eyes straining to see through the darkness. Every minute felt like an hour, and the tension was palpable. We knew we couldn't stay here forever, but we had no idea where to go or what to do next. All we could do was wait and hope that the morning would bring some kind of relief, some sign that we could continue our journey and find true safety. The sun eventually rose, casting its golden rays through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. The whispers faded, and the figures vanished with the coming of dawn.
We emerged from the cabin, shaken and exhausted but alive.
We pushed our bikes until we found a gas station, our bodies trembling with exhaustion.
We never spoke of that night again, but the memory lingered, a dark stain on our souls.
The road, once a symbol of freedom, now held a sinister undertone.
That night on the deserted road changed us. It opened our eyes to a world beyond our understanding, a world where darkness held sway and unseen forces whispered in the shadows.
We continued to seek adventure, but never again with the same carefree abandon.
We knew that some roads are best left untraveled, some secrets best left buried. And we carried the weight of that knowledge with us, a constant reminder of the night we encountered the ghosts on the road.